Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra and Herrera, the lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's episode, we've got a news and notes episode for everyone. We're going to chat a little bit about United States Women's National Team news, NWSL Challenge Cup roster updates. But first, before we get into all that, a quick reminder to follow us on Twitter for all breaking news at Attacking Third. You can follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/Attacking Third. Hit subscribe so you never miss exclusive interviews or whenever we go live. And you can always let us know how you're feeling about us and how we're doing on the episodes. I'm excited to chat a little bit about women's soccer news. As always with you, Lisa. How you doing today?
Sandra, I'm good. I'm really good. We rolled out our first Title IX Tuesday last week. We have our second one coming tomorrow. And this series is very near and dear to my heart because we got to pick the guests that we spoke to. We got to pick the topics and the conversations. And we were recording them out of order of publishing them. This is a sneak peek behind the scenes look at how this works. And we just finished recording one and I have chills. I still have chills from our conversation. So if you haven't already, check out our Title IX Tuesdays that are happening. We did last week with Sam Ewis, U.S. Women's National Team midfielder and Kansas City current midfielder. And we have another great episode dropping tomorrow. So I'm actually like juiced up on that right now, Sandra. How are you doing?
I'm with you. I'm amped. Like having some of these conversations with all of these phenomenal women in different spaces, right, of sport has been really like humbling and also like amped, like amplifying in the same way. I'm just like, guys, like how am I both like in awe and also like jacked up from having these conversations with some of these amazing people in this space. And obviously our first one with Sam Ewis dropped, like you mentioned, that was a fantastic conversation. And yes, we're celebrating Title IX and talking about all that, but we got to take a little bit of a dive into some United States Women's National Team things, right? Talking about the settlement, talking about points that she wants to see, right, in the next CBA, right? So it's a good one. Everybody should check it out if they can. Something else I'm also really excited about, Lisa, is it's March. So we've got March Madness coming up. Let's talk about it really quickly. March Madness is March 17th through April 4th. Attacking Third listeners, we want you to compete with us in a bracket challenge game. I'm going to be in there. Lisa's going to be in there. We're going to have former United States Women's National Team star Lori Lindsay a part of that. You know, our social media guru Sydney will be participating with us, and we want you to join along in the fun as well. You can join us at cbssports.com, and the winner will get a $100 gift card to Paramount Plus. And who really out there just enters just one pool? You can create your own, create a group to compete against other friends, and you can fill out your bracket for a chance to win a Nissan Rogue and a trip to the 2022 Final Four. You can play on the CBS Sports app or at cbssports.com, and the link will be in the description of this episode. So go ahead, see if you can beat me. I'm sure someone out there can. Right?
I challenge everyone to try to beat me. I love March Madness. I love making brackets. I love college basketball.
Okay,
I'm very good. I host a few for my friends. And I'm challenging Attacking Third listeners now. Let's go.
Okay. Oh my! Lisa's putting people on notice. I love that. Energy. Let's go with that. You know, that's why they call it Madness, right? March Madness. We'll see.
Madness, and let's go, Marquette.
There you go. You got it. I was about to say, like, you always got to rep your set. I love that. Let's I'm excited. Let's see if people join along with that. Let's jump in. Let's dive back into women's soccer content. Let's chat a little bit about some news that's dropped to talk about and kick things off this week. The United States Women's National Team announcing their friendlies for the next upcoming international window already. It's going to be taking place in April. They announced the matches on April 9th and the 12th versus Uzbekistan. The United States will be playing these matches in Columbus, Ohio, and in Chester, Pennsylvania. And this is going to be the I think the 10th time that they played, in Columbus, Ohio, and it's going to be the 8th visit to Subaru Park, which is also the home of the Philadelphia Union of MLS. But I think the biggest takeaway from between this coming out of this news drop, Lisa, is that they're set to play this pair of friendlies against Uzbekistan. It's going to be the very first meeting of all time between both of these programs, and they're not just going to play one, but they're going to play 2 matches against each other. And Uzbekistan ranked 45th overall in the FIFA rankings. So maybe a little bit of a mixed reaction, right? When we're seeing a little bit of news like this drop, we're coming off of a She Believes Cup title win, really, for this United States women's national team. And there was the narrative there, right? Within that, like there were a couple storylines of, hey, younger roster, coaching staff wanting to see or get additional looks at younger players, sort of next gen players. And the opposition that they were facing is different from maybe when the She Believes Cup tournament first was introduced and founded, right? Where there was sort of this concept of like, oh, the top 10, you can watch top 10 ranked teams in the world go head to head, and it sort of evolved into a little bit different of it, and branched out and expanded into other teams and other participating regions, right? So we started to see the integration of CONMEBOL teams, other CONCACAF squads in the mix, right, and other Asian federations. And now for this international window in April, the one that takes place right after She Believes Cup, is going to feature games against Uzbekistan. So when I saw that right away, I'm like, there's a real possibility that we might continue to see a little bit of a trend here, Lisa, right? Like we might see another young roster. What were some of your impressions when you saw this news drop?
As a lot of fans, I'm sure we're reading this release and looking at it and saying, why are they even playing Uzbekistan? What is a lot of times fans look at this and kind of blame the competition as to how it's not going to challenge this team. However, I really enjoy this because it's a chance for them to actually play, to travel to some different cities. I mean, they're coming to Philly, so I'm obviously excited about this. But it's a chance for them to play and play in games, which isn't always an opportunity. And I think that it speaks a lot to U.S. Soccer and Vlatko Andonovski saying, okay, here's a FIFA window. We're going to play in it. We're going to compete somehow, even if it's against a 45 ranked team and it's going to be the same competition back to back. But we're going to give it a chance to showcase younger players, showcase different formations, different styles, which we already saw in the She Believes Cup. It also gives them a chance to travel to different parts of the country. I mean, going back to Ohio and Columbus is a huge fan base for the United States women's national team. And then getting to come to Philly, it's also doing I almost want to say like grassroots work of promoting themselves across the country, because this is a great opportunity for young players in Columbus and in Philly to go watch them play live. So like there's a whole other aspect of that. But also when you are playing, which the U.S. rosters typically have been over the last few roster breakouts from She Believes, and I'm sure for these friendlies it will as well, be younger, less capped players. You don't want to throw them up against top 5 teams in the FIFA rankings. You want to give them almost like softballs a little bit. I mean, not horrible softballs, but you want to give them competition that is going to test them and stretch them and make them think and actually give them the confidence. So then when they are facing a Spain, a Germany, a Canada, they have the confidence to score goals and to be dominant because they've already done it. They're not climbing this mountain anymore. They're sitting on top of the confidence mountain, and now they're just putting their skills to the test. So I like this. I mean, it is what it is. We're getting games, and that's pretty fun as well, right? But we'll kind of see how it unfolds and see what happens. I do expect a younger roster, and I kind of expect to see some different things from this team.
I think considering the opposition, that's got to be the next step. You know, play around a little bit. Maybe you see some different things, mix it up. You know, we saw with the drop of this news, we're actually reacting to it, not in real time, but within the same timeline of that it was recently announced. So we're seeing additional reporting adjacent to the news that they will be playing these friendlies in April against Uzbekistan, talking a little bit about why the opposition is Uzbekistan, that there are sources saying that there was actually a top team from Asia that was, sort of aimed to be the opposition during this window, but a combination of required quarantines, government regulations made travel a little bit difficult, right? So reporting from both Meg Linehan and Jeff Kassouf that we're seeing on this type of stuff, and thinking about how this window of time in April for us, Lisa, we know we just got done covering
Yeah.
CONCACAF women qualifiers, right? And that was just the preliminary round of that. The second wave of matches for CONCACAF qualifiers will be taking place over the course of the same window. And then you also have UEFA with, European, matches sort of also taking place. So the difficulty of scheduling top flight
Yes.
teams, right? So to speak, with this combination of scheduling issues and also the pandemic still impacting this type of scheduling is what ultimately made the option of like, hey, do you play this window or do you not play this window? And who can you find to play this window?
Yeah.
And we know that the United States women's national team, more than maybe any other national team in the world, is a team that constantly finds themselves getting together, having camps, playing games. I don't think it's an option to not take the opportunity to
Exactly.
participate in this window, right? So because
Especially
of
when the
that,
pool of players is changing and young and right, like take every opportunity you get to play a game.
yeah, because of that, that's where we're at. Like you said, this is the opportunity that's in front of it. So I'm sure other things will come out, right? We'll probably see a roster that will eventually drop in terms of the players who will be participating in these two matches, and we'll get to maybe chat a little bit more about what we think we could see out of that. But United States set to participate in a couple of friendlies for April 9th and April 12th against Uzbekistan. Let's talk a little bit about NWSL preseason, because we've absolutely been doing that alongside everything else, right? The Title IX stuff that we've been doing, any of the United States women's national team news that we've been covering. NWSL preseason absolutely in full swing. We've done team by team previews for all 12 clubs. Please check them out as they drop. But there's also been a couple preseason matches for some of
Mhm.
these teams that we maybe should talk about a little bit. Now, these are preseason scrimmages, so all of them, with really the exception of one, weren't typically accessible in terms of being able to watch, right? If you're a fan and you're trying to look for preseason matches, but
Me,
let's take a
that
look.
was me as a fan. I was like, "Where can I
Where
watch?
can you find them,
I
right?
wanna watch all of these," and I was sad I couldn't,
We're thirsty for
honestly.
soccer, honestly, for individual soccer. We miss it. Let's take a look at maybe some of these results real quick. Kansas City Current, Orlando Pride actually meeting up for a scrimmage, played out to a 0-0 draw. Kansas City Current against Washington Spirit. The Current taking that one over the reigning champions, winning 6-0 in
Ooh.
that one. And then there's other teams that will have some other matches going on. But I want to talk about right now about games that had fixtures. When you're looking at maybe just these couple games right here, Lisa, the KC Current matches against Pride and Washington Spirit, what's standing out to you here?
Well, first of all, the KC Current winning over Washington Spirit 6-0. I think that is a pretty fun stat, a fun,
Yep.
like, first match for them to have,
It's a
and
real
then
preseason scoreline.
yeah, preseason scoreline, and then to go back to back and Kansas City to tie against
Yeah.
Orlando Pride, like, I don't yes, like, the individual scores of each of those are interesting, but when you throw them together, the fact that Kansas City dominated against reigning NWSL champions Washington Spirit 6-0 and then tied to Orlando Pride, which is as we said in our preview, they're going through a bit of a rebrand, a restructuring this year as Orlando Pride, and the fact that Kansas City could do that, I'm pretty impressed. I'm pretty surprised about what's happening here. Intrigued. I'm intrigued, and that's why, like, I wish I could have watched these, and I wish I could have really seen everything that happened on the pitch without just like reading lineups and reading recaps. I like that Kansas City is playing games, right? So that's the other thing. When we look at all of these preseason scrimmages and what's happening, teams that are playing, that's great. Like you should be playing. This is your preseason. You're about to start Challenge Cup. You're about to go against two new expansion clubs. Depending on how you did in the last 2021 season, you're probably looking to improve or at least maintain that consistency. So you need to be playing matches. You need to be playing scrimmages, games against outside competition. Now, playing against collegiate programs, that's big, and that's something, and that's doing something. As a former collegiate player, we played against the Red Stars in Wisconsin. We played against the Red Stars in our preseason and in the spring season. So it helps, but I think like as a college player, I got more amped for that than they were, just because I was like, I'm going against the
Yeah.
pros. Let's see what Kristen Press can do to me. Destroy me every time for anyone that's curious. But then to see that these clubs are going out of their way, Kansas City to play Washington, to play Orlando, that's really promising, I think, to see that happening. When you saw these, Sandra, what did you like? Did you like that Houston went to Mexico? They really found some outside competition.
Listen, I loved that. We chatted a little bit about that and reacted to it a little bit on socials. Houston Dash and head coach Jim Clarkson are really continuing a little bit of a tradition here, right? This is not Houston's first rodeo in terms of jumping into inter-scrimmage competition with Liga MX Femenil teams, right? So there have been moments in the past where Liga MX Femenil teams have, come to Houston and played, and Houston jumping into Mexico and doing that. And they went a little further south into Mexico. They actually faced off against Pumas Femenil for this preseason scrimmage, which is they're based out of Mexico City. So heading a little further south, right, into the country, which I think is going to give a little bit of a different experience, right, for this Houston Dash team in their preseason. They're going to be the only team that sort of has this type of event that can, yes, also that's going to have training, that's going to have a game, or that had a game attached to it, but also have this sort of team camaraderie kind of experience. So this sort of team building experience to sort of have with them adjacent to all of this stuff that they're doing in preseason, I think is going to be huge for the Dash, honestly, when we're sort of looking at them towards the end of things overall, how they sort of tackle their regular season.
Yeah.
They end up walking away with a win, right? And it absolutely had some preseason vibes to it. This was the game that we were alluding to. We were talking about not a ton of these preseason games were available to watch, but Houston Dash made this one available. There was a live stream that they were able to connect with a feed out there in Mexico and be able to put up on their website, and people were able to take a look at that. So largely scoreless for the most part, majority of the game, but a late game winner for Houston Dash. And I liked that. I liked seeing these two sides go together. I was left with the same impression that I always have. I would love to see more preseason, like, because it's NWSL preseason, but Liga MX Femenil is in season. So it's like this kind of interest, like it's an opportunity, I think, for both of these leagues to kind of get in there and sort of go toe to toe, right? So it was really interesting to sort of see. You definitely saw some, what I think you consider kind of like a Dash B side a little bit in terms of the lineup, right?
Yeah.
Going up against maybe some typical starters of Pumas Femenil. So
do you think, sorry, word vomit question here. Do you think that James Clarkson being a coach at Washington or at Houston now for a few years and kind of getting the lay of the land gives him a leg up to get some of these preseason roster scrimmages like on the books early on?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Clarkson's, he's been involved in the Houston franchise for a long time. He was with for Youth Academy specifically on the Dynamo and Dash side of things. So he's been with the franchise for a little while before even going into that head coaching role, right? And now he's got 4 seasons as a head coach under his belt with this team. But a lot of those youth development ties, you reach out to other areas, right? So he's got some connections, I'm sure, deep on the Mexico side of things when it comes to being able to sit down, meet with people, have meetings, and discuss about how to get games going in action that could benefit both clubs here. There could be a mutually beneficial thing. And I think probably Clarkson, more than any other head coach in the league, understands and respects the value of that, in terms of being able to look right next door and say, hey, there's actually a whole other country right next door with a fully professionalized league that we should start engaging with a little bit more when it comes to expanding a club competition. So as of now, Houston are the only franchise that can say that they have sort of met Mexico and Liga Mex Femenil kind of halfway and sort of have these kind of matches. So whether they're in regular season type scrimmages or preseason scrimmages, I'm a big fan of them. I would love to see the continuation of this, and honestly, the involvement of it, and maybe see some other teams get involved into the mix of things as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, but this is just a taste. That's like what the best part is, that it is preseason and it is a taste. And we're giving a lot of credit. Well, I'm giving a lot of credit to like these teams for getting these scrimmages and getting these matches on the calendar because it's so necessary. But it's interesting that there also are teams that haven't announced preseason scrimmages.
No, not yet, but they'll be coming up. I mean, I know there's clubs
Yeah.
that like you mentioned, there's clubs that go against collegiate side. You
Mhm.
speaking of personal experience about that, having been with Marquette, but Racing Louisville, right, gonna face off against some opponents that on the NCAA side of things. So will North Carolina Courage. That's something that's not unfamiliar with them, right? Being in the same backyard as a UNC, as a Duke, they'll likely see some scrimmage or closed door competitions there. Portland, though, I think it's important to maybe highlight here, they're bringing back their preseason tournament. Portland typically hosted a spring invitational during preseason, which they would host two other NWSL sides and the United States U23 women's national team, all in Portland. And obviously, the brakes were pumped on that in light of the pandemic. It was one of the first things to actually get suspended and canceled back in 2020, and then we really didn't see, the comeback of that. But here we are in 2022. They're going to have another spring invitational. It's going to be taking place March 5th through the 11th. This time at Providence Park, and before in the past, it's taking place at University of Portland. So it's going to be back at Providence Park, and it's going to be the return of the Red Stars, who have participated in every single one of these spring tournaments since their since their beginning. And then it's going to include OL Reign, and it's once again going to include the U23 team. So round robin style for those teams to sort of get some preseason matches in ahead of Challenge Cup. So I'm sure we'll maybe be able to take in a couple matches there, hopefully, with the resources at Portland, and maybe we'll get to see some preseason scrimmages on that end. But with these matches, some of them already taking place and some of them which will soon take place, that means with the new month came some new roster updates. And we're going to go through some of these because as we were doing our team by team previews for NWSL, we were going through these preseason rosters, going through them by position, seeing which players had made this initial preseason rosters. And some of these rosters were huge, right, Lisa? We're talking like 36, 38 some players, and some of them were a little lower. So maybe with with a new month, with this first round of cuts in preseason, there might not be a ton for some teams. Well, on other teams, there might have been a significant change, right? So maybe let's start right in order here. You want to maybe hit me with some interesting bullet points what we're looking at for Angel City FC. They listed 25 previously, but now 26. What's going on here with Angel City?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about all of these rosters, and we did dive so deep into them when we did our team by team preview, but now that these official rosters are out, it's so interesting to look at the changes that happened. I mean, one of the biggest for Angel City that has been talked about before, but no Julie Ertz, who was traded from Chicago in the offseason. She wasn't listed on their initial roster back in early February, and she's not listed on this one. It did come out. Angel City spokesperson reported to the Equalizer that she is not planning on playing throughout the 2022 season, but that was kind of it. That's about the extent of the information we have on Julie Ertz. If she does come back to play, change her mind, whatever circumstances change for 2022, Angel City still has her rights. So she is still with Angel City. But otherwise, I mean, not too many changes, just adding one player to their roster listed now, but still three goalkeepers, which I think is the biggest change when looking at all of these rosters and kind of overviewing them is the goalkeepers. A lot of teams had 4, even 5, and now they're down to 3, which is much more typical and normal. Still, midfielders being probably the largest number when you look at the overall of all of these 12 clubs and their rosters that they put out. Midfielders are probably the biggest. So that's Angel City, not too many changes, but Chicago Red Stars, another roster that started with 37 in early February and now only has 33 players listed. Just a little bit of changes happening amongst them. I mean, mostly we saw roster numbers drop for these clubs. There were a few clubs that actually added players. OL Reign and Orlando Pride, they added each a player. Chicago, they lost 4. San Diego, they lost 6. And Washington Spirit, the club that had the most number of players, 38 players originally listed on the roster. Now they only have 30. So that was a big difference. Still 4 goalkeepers for Washington Spirit, but a lot of player changes happening. Even like Kumi Yokiyama, who was traded to Gotham, that had happened before. But yeah, just 30 players, which is still a lot. That's still a lot of players considering how many they're allowed to play. And for Racing Louisville, they have the lowest, the shortest roster, the lowest number of players with 24 listed on their preseason roster ahead of the Challenge Cup that's to come. But a lot of changes, a lot of players coming in and out of these rosters.
Yeah, Challenge Cup is coming up. It's going to be kicking off on March 18th. So I think with this first round, right, of cuts to the preseason roster, this is a little bit of a narrowing down. This is a little bit of a whittling down. Probably, we're going to see a different mix of players involved in some of these Challenge Cup games, outside of some of the preseason scrimmages that we've been talking a little bit about already. This is going to be the first kind of crack at NWSL versus NWSL type of competition. So seeing this kind of this early March 1st kind of, preseason cut, it just sort of feels like, okay, now this is like the group that is going to be continuing to sort of try to, make certain strides together as something like the Challenge Cup looms closer, because we're talking about at this point roughly 2 weeks or so away. So the little things in between these rosters, right? I think I love hearing the things that you were mentioning right now between some of these cuts on the player rosters. But the little things that stand out to me are the things that I like to kind of fixate on and pay attention to. But even with you mentioning with Gotham about how they had similar to Washington, that they had a ton of players and now they kind of narrowed it down to just 30, which is still technically a lot, right? There's going to have to be another round of cuts there to sort of meet the player cap side of things. But the little things like the Elizabeth Eddy not being a defender, listed as a defender, but being listed as a midfielder, right? The positional things are always
there was
very
a lot of
intriguing.
positional changes. I mean, you mentioned Elizabeth Eddy, Brie Vasali, originally listed as a forward for Houston. Now she's a midfielder. Haley Mace for Kansas City, originally a midfielder, now as a defender. Elizabeth Eddy, as you mentioned. So those changes are so interesting. And is it because of the new coaches? Is it because of the other personnel? And of course, I mean, you can be listed as a defender and start as a striker every game once the season comes around. But it's just interesting to see kind of how these coaches categorize the players that they have on their team.
Absolutely. It's something that we're going to keep an eye on moving forward. Again, as Challenge Cup gets closer and closer, games that people will be able to watch across CBS platforms, Big Network, CBS Sports Network, and Paramount Plus. We'll keep an eye on it with any other updates and keep all of our listeners informed as best as possible. As usual, we want to thank everybody for joining us and listening along to our News and Notes episode. You can follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third for more. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you listen to your podcast shows. You can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify now. And if you have any questions for us, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with your question, and Lisa and I will answer during a mailbag segment. We're also available as video. Subscribe to us. Visit youtube.com/attackingthird. And we'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, with our second edition of Title IX Tuesdays. This episode focusing on basketball legend Sandy Brondello. You can check it out. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.